Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about fromEvent creation function. The fromEvent function allows us to create observables from DOM elements or Node.js emitter. In this video, we'll stick to writing examples related to DOM events such as button click, mouse over, key press, and so on, because that's what fromEvent is commonly used for. So let's get started. I've already created a JavaScript file called as fromEventObservable.js and I have referred to the same in our index.html file. Let's do a refresh of our web app. Cool, nothing yet in the console. In the index.html file, we'll add two elements, one button and another a paragraph element. The paragraph element will hold a counter value and the button will just increment this counter like from 1, 2, 3, just increment the value. So let's start with adding our button element. Call that as button. Provide it an ID and just write it as increment. Save it. Now we can see the button element here. Now we'll create the paragraph element. Assign it an ID, counter, and we'll keep the value as 0 as of now. Save it. As we can see in our web app, we have a button and the paragraph element. Right now, if I click on increment, nothing is going to happen. So in order for our application to update the counter, we first need a listener. Someone that will listen to this click event and the reaction will be updating the counter value. And for the same, we'll use the fromEvent creation function. So let's head to our JavaScript file. Since we need the fromEvent, let's start with importing the same from the RxJS library. We have the fromEvent. The fromEvent creation function accepts two arguments. First argument is the event source, which in our case is the button element. In other cases, it can be other DOM elements such as window, document, or maybe the Node.js event emitter, right? But for us, it's the button. So let's pull the button element by ID and pass the same here. Create a var. We'll fetch it by ID. And the ID that we provided to it was btn, provide the same. And this button element will pass it as the first argument to the fromEvent function. The second argument is the event type you want to listen for. For DOM elements, it can be key press, mouse over, submit or input. And now our button element case is the click event. So we'll write the same. That's it. Now we know that fromEvent returns an observable. So let's collect it. We'll call this var as, let's say, button click followed by a dollar symbol. Now that our observable is ready, next what we need is an observer and subscription mechanism. Up until now, whatever observer we have created uses the object approach, right, for handling the next error or complete notification. But in this example, let us use the callback mechanism to handle these notifications. So we'll write button click the observable dot subscribe, and we know the first callback is the next notification. For now, let's just log it. Whatever value we receive, we'll just log it out. Hit save. In our web app, let's click on the button. As you can see, whenever I click on this button, we are receiving the event object. It's normally when you have this event listener, right? It's the same event object that you will receive. Now I've already created a function, kind of a util function to update the counter and update the text content in our paragraph element. Let's make use of that. We'll call the same function inside the next handler. The function name is increment counter. We'll call it. We'll also log the value that we received here. Right? Save it. Now in our web app, let's click on increment button. As you can see, as we click on the button, the text contained in our paragraph element is getting updated. Just to show you how the increment function looks like, we can head to the utils file. Here you can see we have the increment counter function. It collects the counter element, that is nothing but our paragraph element. Okay, grabs the text contained and then increments it by 1 and assigns it back to the paragraph element. The same function, we invoke it here. So when we call increment, it keeps on updating the value. In our fromEvent creation function, instead of button element, we can also pass document. Right? Let's save. Okay, whenever now I click on our web app, it will increment the counter. Right? Irrespective of whether I click on button or not. So you can change the event source based on your requirement. Lastly, let's have one more example with input text box, and this time we'll listen for the enter key press. Let's create the input element. We'll head to index.html and in here let's create input of type text, right? And the ID that will pass to it, let's call it as input box. Let's also have a placeholder. We'll just assign a string, let's say name please. Okay. Hit save. Now we have our input text box. Right. Before we go ahead, let me just comment it out, or maybe I'll just replace it with button. Hit save. If I just type a name and press enter, nothing we are going to see in our log. So in order to handle the enter key press, we'll create the observable using the fromEvent. And this time our event source will be the input element. Let's create that. Let's call it as input box element. Right? And we'll access it by its ID. And the ID that we passed to it was input box. Now we'll call the fromEvent function. First argument is the event source, to which we'll provide input box element. The second argument is the event type that you want to listen for. And in this case, the event type is keyUp. It returns an observable. Let's create a variable for it. And call it as input element. Okay. Now let's create our observer and we'll use the same callback mechanism. So we'll call input element observable.subscribe, and in the next notification we'll have the value. For now, let us just console log it. Console.log. Wow. Hit save. Now I'll go to the input text and type a name. As you can see right now, for every key press, our next notification is being logged, right? Let me just do a refresh. I'll type one character. You can see we receive our next notification. What we are interested in is the enter key. So let's modify our next handler. Now let's rename to event because that's what we receive, right? And we'll add a if condition. If event.key equals enter, then only log the statement. Let's say enter key is pressed. Hit save. Now this time when I tap each character, we won't see the console log. And if I hit enter, then we'll see this log statement. Now you can see if I just go ahead and press enter key again, we'll see the log statement. So right now we are just logging out the statement, right? If you have any let's say an API request, you can invoke the API here, or any other methods you want to invoke, you can do the same inside the if condition. So that's it. That's all about from event. This also ends our creation function list. In our next video, we'll start with operators, and those are really interesting. Until then, happy coding.